Your visit in Romania takes place when we celebrate 8th of March, Women's Day. And I would like to start from this point, and I would like to ask you what is your opinion, or how would you comment on the fact that only 2 women are part of the Romanian government from a total of 21 ministers? Yeah.
Yes, of course this is not a situation which we are happy about, but the situation in all of the European Union is uneven. So you get member states which are advanced in this area of policy, and you get others which are lacking behind. Of course, this is not good for governance. This is not good for democracy, because women are not represented as they should be in parliament and in government. And we have to also understand that the member states, and not only the member states, but also all the countries in the world which have made progress in this area, where they have a critical mass of women at decision-making positions in parliament and in government, are those member states or those countries around the world which at some point in their history they introduced some corrective mechanism so that they can have more women in parliament. Unless these countries which are lagging behind introduce some form of corrective measures, then it will take about another 100 years, it is estimated, for them to have a good representation of women in parliament. So really, there are women who are qualified, there are women who are ready to do politics, but it is not easy. And the reason I say this, it's not just the legislation in terms of correcting mechanisms which these countries need to put in place, but it is also policies, supporting structures, because legislation is not enough. You have to see, we have to see that the environment is conducive for women, not only to be in parliament, but to be in the labor market. But we are telling women, we want you to have more children, because that is the reality of many member states. You know, the European Union is aging, and we need to have more children. We are also telling women, we need you in the labor market. So what are the governments of the member states doing so that women, if it is their choice, can do both, can be in the labor market and maybe can be in parliament also, or in government, and that they can balance their family responsibilities with their work responsibilities. But unless there are structures such as good and affordable childcare, care for the elderly, care for persons with disabilities, we will not manage to get these women to participate in society. There are nearly 8 million women in the European Union who are qualified and trained, but are not in the labor market because of care responsibilities. So they are doing unpaid work, unpaid care work, and they are not doing the paid work which they are qualified for. So it's really up to the governments to have these support structures, and that is why the European Commission also came out with the care package last September, whereby we are looking at presenting new targets for the Barcelona targets with regards to childcare, for instance. So these are all supporting measures which need to be taken so that women can reach their full potential. We invest a lot in women's education and training. In many member states, there are more women who are graduating from university than there are men. But because there are in these supporting structures, you lose these women. So it's like investing and then losing out on that investment because you are not getting a return. Importantly, also, when women are not financially independent, this is closely linked also to situations of domestic violence.
Yeah.
Because if a woman is a victim of domestic violence and is financially independent, she may choose to leave that relationship.
Exactly.
But if she is financially dependent on her abuser, then what can she do? She has to put food on the table for herself, for her children, so she stays in the relationship. So you have to look in the whole context of the situation of women. So there needs to be legislation in order to support women, and temporary legislation in order to have this mechanism, this connective mechanism, so that there are more women in decision-making positions. Provide the structures necessary so that women can do both. They can balance their work life and their home life, and also see that they are reaching their potential, because they would have reached it academically or training-wise, but we are throwing all this talent away. This, when we need so many people to work. As you know, we are importing labor, and we have all this human capital which is not being used because they have to be doing other work, care work, which is not paid.
How do you explain that despite the European legal framework, over half of Europeans believe that discrimination, especially racial one, is widespread in their country? How would you explain that?
Yes, this is true, and we see incidents of discrimination, of racism everywhere. So, as I was saying earlier, the legislation on its own, it's never enough. We have to work a lot on education, on culture, on attitude, on the systemic racism, on the structural racism, which is some people are not even aware, and some institutions sometimes are not even aware that they are racist. So that is something which has to be tackled from a very early age. I remember going to schools, to early years, like kindergarten, and you see children of different races playing together and being really inclusive. But then they go home and they unlearn what they learned in school or in the nursery. And because the parents tell them don't play with the child or with the other child, and nobody is born racist. You learn how to be a racist. So somebody teaches you how to be racist. So of course the legislation helps, but we need to do so much more on changing culture, on changing attitudes, on educating. It is of the essence that we continue not only teaching our children, but showing them by example, because children copy us. So if they see us discriminating against something, against someone, then they will think that that is acceptable, and they will not be worried if they do it themselves. So really we have to lead by example. Of course the legislation is important, but as you rightly point out, in spite of the legislation, so you have the legislation, but then you have all the other work, the policy work, which we have to do.
And in the specific case of Romania, what would you recommend the Romanian government to do to fight better, to reduce significantly the discrimination against Roma in Romania, especially Roma women?
Well, it's not just Romania. I have been to Roma settlements all over the European Union, and what I see is, to use a mild word, scandalous, because the situation these people are living in 2023 is definitely not acceptable. It never was, but the more we progress as societies, the less acceptable it becomes. So there is a lot that we have to do. We have the Roma inclusion framework, and we are assessing how member states are adhering to this framework. But I suggest to people, to politicians, to go and see with their own eyes, to go in the settlements and see the hungry children, the poor families, the lack of hygiene, the illnesses which are part of the daily lives of these people, the segregation in schools, mothers and fathers not being able to send their children to school because they have no means to wash them, because there are no services and utilities. So it's really, from a humane point of view now, I'm saying, to look at how these people are living, to speak to them, and to try and walk a few paces in their shoes would help you understand how much more needs to be done. But a lot of European funds are devoted to this situation. But my experience is that sometimes these funds are not even used. So there is a lot that we have to address, because the funds are there and they should be used for the benefit of these people. Because as I said earlier, it is unacceptable to have people living in these conditions. The first time that I went to a Roma settlement, I couldn't sleep at night, revising in my head what I had seen and thinking, how could this be possible in the European Union, that we have over 6 million citizens who are living in these situations where they have no hope in life, where their children are already destined for short and horrible lives. But that is a reality which I think we should make a priority. These are people like you and me, flesh and blood. They have feelings, they have brains, they have hearts, and yet they are leading miserable lives. And I think we should do much more and see also why these funds are not being used for to help these people get out of their misery.
How big do you think is the risk that the anti-LGBTQ measures that we saw in recent years in countries such as Poland and Hungary to expand to some other European states, especially to Eastern European states like Romania? How big?
Well, we should take nothing for granted. So everything from LGBTIQ rights for persons with disabilities, women's rights. We can see progress, but we can also see backsliding, as you point out, and as we are seeing. But it is our duty to be watchful and to be vigilant on these realities, and that is why I keep a very close contact with parliamentarians, with members of the European Parliament, especially. Because they are representing the citizens, and I can hear from them exactly what is happening with regards to these rights. And also I keep very close contact with civil society organizations who represent these people, so that I can know what is happening. And then when the European Union can take action, such as what happened with Poland in terms of funds for projects, because the argumentation was that whoever is implementing projects of the European Union must uphold European Union values and the value of inclusion and the value of the appreciation of diversity and the value of anti-discrimination are all European values. So the money of European citizens cannot go to those municipalities where they are excluding people, because it goes against the spirit of the European Union. So that is one thing we have seen a backtracking in this, where there were LGBTIQ free zones, so-called, and we discussed with them in this way, and now we are seeing a reversing of that. So we have to, I mean, we don't want to penalize anyone. We just want people to understand that nobody chooses how they are born. If you are gay, if you are trans, if you are intersex, you didn't choose to be born that way. And therefore, us as legislators, we cannot discriminate against you. We cannot penalize you because of the way you were born. And I think that if everybody understands this, and people mostly understand this when they have someone in their family who is LGBTIQ, and you know, they sometimes they do not accept this reality, but then of course you would love your son anyway, or your daughter anyway, so they will start changing, and we must look at LGBTIQ people as our sons and daughters who were born to us. They are in our community, they are in our society, and we must do all that we can to help these people advance in their lives and reach their full potential. Even here, as in the case of women, we lose a lot of talent and potential because we discriminate against LGBTIQ persons. Also, we know, for instance, that the highest rate of suicide amongst youth is amongst trans youth. So we are doing something wrong. Definitely, we are not, instead of helping these youth to be themselves and to be creative and to use their talents, we are telling them, no, you are not part of our society, which drives them then to do things which no mother and no father wants their son or their daughter to do, of course, but that is a reality. So instead of embracing diversity, we are excluding people because of the way that they were born. So this is the opposite of having an inclusive society where we can all live our lives the way that we want to live our lives, as long as you are not harming anybody. You should be free, you should have the freedom to develop your creativity, to become a person who reaches his or her full potential, and that you are supported by society, you are supported by the authorities, by the government, by the European Union, and not be excluded because of something which you did not do.
When do you envisage the equal pay and gender balance in decision making will become realities in the EU, and what are the obstacles in achieving this?
Well, there has been agreement on the proposals, and now it's up to the member states. These are very important. These are very important measures, again, for what we want to achieve in terms of equality in our societies, and if we really want a union of equality, these are two very important pillars in that direction.